The summer box office season is behind us, and contrary to what Hollywood expected going into it, it turned out a complete bust. Why is a big mystery to them, but the stars, certainly Ayo Edeberi, know what to do: double and triple down on the message and activism. This video is sponsored by Black Forest Supplements. Going into this summer blockbuster season, Hollywood were sure it was going to be a big one for them. I mean, they had all of this research from their own internal agencies which assured them that audiences really wanted soft and emotional male characters and stronger female characters. Case in point, one such agency is Dio, and back in June, its CEO and founder H. Shannon referred to their own internal research and said, "This data points towards a shifting perception of masculinity and an evolving appetite for richer, more grounded storytelling." Not too many masculine movies to be found this summer, and yet the audience by and large stayed away in droves, leading to industry postmortems like this one in The Hollywood Reporter. Summer box office clobbered by kryptonite. Domestic revenue barely matches last year. The May to Labor Day season initially soared, but global grosses took a nosedive as foreign movie ticket sales plunged further and a glut of male-skewing tentpoles battled for scraps in the US. Right off the bat then, the problem is implied to be too many male-skewing properties, even though I somehow doubt the audience feel there were that many movies that were all that male-skewing. Still, Hollywood's own agencies, like the aforementioned Dio, would appear to suggest there were too many male-driven movies, and the likes of Ayo Edeberi certainly seems to agree with that, as we are about to see here. But first, let's take a moment to talk about NMN, that's nicotinamide mononucleotide, a natural supplement which can help reduce weight, cholesterol, and even blood pressure in overweight adults, thereby functionally reverse aging. Here's Professor David Sinclair from the Center for the Biology of Aging at Harvard Medical School talking about it on Joe Rogan.
When I talk to someone like you who's an actual research scientist of this stuff, I always want to know, what are you doing to yourself? How old are you?
Turning 50. So
you're turning 50?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought you were 50. I would have figured you were for about 41, 42.
I eat healthy. I try to skip meals. I also take supplements. And in fact, most of my colleagues are in the field of aging, or anti-aging as people call it. So I take NMN every morning.
What is NMN?
Good question. So let me take a quick step back.
Sure.
So about 20 years ago, Lenny Guarente and a team of us at MIT discovered a set of genes that controls aging in yeast cells, just brewer's yeast, what you find in beer and bread. And those genes are called sirtuins, and there are 7 of them in our bodies, 5 in yeast. And what they do is they protect all organisms on the planet, plants, bacteria, humans, from deterioration and disease. They're like the Pentagon. They sense when we're hungry, sense when we're exercising, and they send out the troops to defend us. So when you put more of these genes into a yeast cell or a mouse, they'll live longer, between 5 to 20% longer. And so we think that these genes are responsible for the effects of dieting and exercise, which is great. What that means is we can now mimic that with molecules. So NMN is one of those molecules.
As you get older, NMN will help you stay strong, healthy, and mentally sharp, because it acts as a precursor to NAD+, which Sinclair has more to say about here.
Get this, so sirtuins need NAD to work. Without them, they don't work. In fact, if you don't have NAD in your body, you'd be dead in about 30 seconds. It's a really important molecule. But as we get older, we lose NAD. So by the time you're 50, like I almost am, you have about half the levels of what you had when you were 20. So that's not good. And these sirtuins, they don't protect the body without high levels of NAD.
There are a number of other NAD products out there, but NMN in particular works so well that the FDA have been working towards having it reclassified as a performance-enhancing drug, which may happen already on September 30th, and that would take it away from you and put it under the exclusive control of Big Pharma. That's why you should stock up on it now, before any potential restrictions come into play, and to help you do that, Black Forest Supplements, the sponsor of this video, is giving the viewers of this channel a special offer of 40% off for the next 48 hours. This stuff isn't cheap, so it's a great opportunity to stock up now when you get 40% off for the next 48 hours. Link is in the description. With that, let's get back to Hollywood trying to explain away why audiences are no longer showing up for their movies, and what the stars and other special interest groups would like them to do about it. In their post-mortem over the summer, The Hollywood Reporter writes, "All had assumed this year's summer lineup would have the strength to equal or surpass the $4.09 billion grossed in the summer of 2023. But it isn't to be, leaving studio executives and exhibitors in a state of shock as they wrestle with how to operate in a new world order where moviegoing might never return to pre-lockdown levels." One studio that's still smiling is Warner Brothers, which has been on a dazzling winning streak. So, two things of note here. One is Warner, aka the House of David Zaslav, a man who is hated for being an outsider who doesn't play by Hollywood's usual rules, and maybe because of that, his studio are going against the fold and delivering hit after hit, The Conjuring: Last Rites being the most recent one. Every other studio following the more traditional Hollywood playbook are struggling and at a loss of what to do in this post-lockdown world. And that's the second thing of note. This notion that the audience preference somehow has changed and they don't know how or how to respond to it. Let's briefly jump back in time to November of 2023, when that Park Place did a write-up on Disney filing a 10-K with the Securities and Exchange Commission where it was stated, "We at Disney face risks relating to misalignment with public and consumer tastes and preferences for entertainment, travel, and consumer products, which impact demand for our entertainment offerings and products and the profitability of any of our businesses." Underneath the bullet point, the company states, "Our businesses create entertainment, travel, and consumer products, whose success depends substantially on consumer tastes and preferences that change in often unpredictable ways." Again, Disney and Hollywood at large are under the delusion that consumer tastes and preferences change in often unpredictable ways. That is complete and utter bullcrap. Consumer tastes and preferences generally don't change, and when they do, it's marginal change, and even that only happens between generations, as a general thing. If you agree with that assertion, remember to smash that like, subscribe if you haven't, and indicate you want notifications on all videos. And if you don't agree, let me know why in the comments. But what has changed, if not audience preferences, is Hollywood's own output. And this changed in a way that has repelled the audience worldwide. If Hollywood wanted to get back in sync with the audience, all they had to do was get back into the mindset where they were in, say, 2010, before they were trying to push the message, and see the audience return. Instead, they are at a loss of what to do in this brave new post-lockdown world. Let's return to the Hollywood Reporter's post-mortem, which reads, "I'm very, very nervous for the future," says one top studio executive. "There are all these studios and companies making movies. I don't think there's enough of an audience for them." Well, that's what happens when you spend years chasing a fabled modern audience while chasing away the one that actually exists. There are a couple of different sides to this though, and one of those is streaming, the killer of far bigger revenue streams, but which Hollywood has done everything in their power to make happen, against their own best interest. About this, the article reads, David Croyer's consulting and research firm Just Watch Media, which monitors trailer campaigns and moviegoing habits, found that weeks ago, only 25% of people said they'd prefer to wait to see a summer movie on streaming, a healthy sign. In more recent days, however, that number shot up to more than 36%. He says this hits mid-size movies particularly hard, as well as being a major reason why the sheer number of people going to the cinema may never equal pre-lockdown times. Well, Hollywood brought that on themselves. They should have fought streaming tooth and nail. Instead, they engaged in a futile streaming war that could do nothing but drive the audience away. But there is also the international downturn, about which the piece reads, "Studio insiders say a raft of other markets in Asia have soured on US movies as local content flourish. That includes South Korea and markets across Southeast Asia. One startling example, Hollywood titles used to make up 50% of the box office revenue in Vietnam. Now it's just 14%. The downturn has hurt superhero picks in particular, explaining the lackluster offshore performance of Marvel's Fantastic Four: First Steps and DC Studios' Superman. But of course, The Hollywood Reporter doesn't say anything about why superhero movies are the worst affected by the international downturn, when for the past decade, superhero movies are what drove the growth in the international box office in the first place. And more than any other genre, superhero movies were the ones that consistently would perform even better internationally than domestically. And it's high time to retire the excuse that it being so pro-American is why Superman struggled internationally this year, because as we now know, every other comic book movie this year struggled far worse. Now, I've previously made it clear the real culprit here is Hollywood's own DEI drive, which has harmed superhero movies more than any other genre, and that is why the international audience are now abandoning them at a greater rate than anything else, as the values they now oppose are perceived as more and more repelling the further and further away from the Hollywood bubble you get. I mean, take Vietnam. Do you think the Eternals saved any lives there? Did they feel safe, seen, and represented by Captain America: Brave New World? Or did they long back to the engaging storytelling of Captain America: The Winter Soldier or Guardians of the Galaxy? Still, Hollywood are not only not ready to admit that, they are hypersensitive to anything that supports their own ideological bias, which is why a recent interview with Ayo Edeberi may prove particularly troublesome. At the Toronto Film Festival, Italian journalist Federica Polidoro interviewed after the Hunt stars Julia Roberts, Andrew Garfield, and Ayo Edeberi. Having the outside view from Italy, Polidoro of course knows that both the Black Lives Matter and Me Too movements were extremely harmful to both society at large and the film industry in particular. And in being an experienced journalist, she has a strategy behind her questions and who she asks which questions and when. I've seen that before. Typically, an interviewer will ask those on one side of an issue one question, and then use their answer for a much more extensive follow-up question to those or the one on the other side of that issue. That is pretty standard, but we'll never know what her exact plan was for this interview though, because before Julia Roberts and Andrew Garfield could answer the question that was directed at them, what was lost during the politically correct era in Hollywood now that the Me Too and Black Lives Matter movements supposedly are done. Ayo Edeberi couldn't wait for them to answer, or for the follow-up directed at her, so she simply butted in, rambling. I don't think it's done. I don't think it's done at all. I think maybe hashtags might not be used as much, but I do think that there's work being done by activists, by people, every day. That's beautiful, important work that's not finished. That's really, really, really active for a reason. Because this world is really charged, and that work isn't finished at all. Maybe there's not mainstream coverage in the way that there might have been, daily headlines in the way it might have been 8 or so years ago, but I don't think it means that the work is done. That's what I would say. Except she hijacked a question for someone else, and so the follow-up that was aimed at her never came. But that didn't matter. The Hollywood trades all further disseminated her answer as the way forward, in the process tacitly smearing Federica Polidoro as racist, for supposedly having excluded Edeberi from the question, even though they know full well a much more extensive follow-up for her was likely forthcoming. Polidoro was subject to a barrage of hate and even death threats afterwards. But the bigger issue here, I think, is the artificial virality of her answer, especially in all the Hollywood trades. as well as numerous other publications, because that is just the kind of thing that the many activists within the Hollywood system will be sure to weaponize for all it's worth, and convince the many studio executives at a loss of what to do in this brave new post-lockdown world, that continuing the message and divisive ideological content is the way to go. Doing so, however, I submit can only lead to even more ruin. The last thing Hollywood needs now, after a summer that was a disaster for everyone but Warner, is more activism. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments. And before you go, remember to seize this opportunity to stock up on NMN now when you get 40% off for the next 48 hours. Link is in the description.